So for today's story, I wanted to kind of keep along the same lines of fairies. Ever since my daughter was little, I've always told her that just because you can't see something doesn't mean that you shouldn't believe in it. So I used to tell her whenever we would drive like by forests or just, a bunch of trees just kind of randomly there, I'd be like, look really hard, and maybe if you're looking hard enough and you believe in your heart that you might be able to see a fairy fly by or a unicorn's horn, just out of the glimpse of your eye. So I would always teach her things like that because I think it's important for you to let your kids kind of, form their own opinions, have imaginations, and just be kids, and to know from a young age that just because you don't see something doesn't mean that you can't believe it, kind of like just having faith. You can't really see faith, but you have it. So anyway, when I came across this fairy story, it's by one of my favorite psychics, so I've already talked about in a video. Her name is Sylvia Browne. I was absolutely captivated. I have always, since I was little, which is probably why I, told my daughter the things that I told her. I've always loved stories about like elves and gnomes and fairies and mermaids. I mean, I have a freaking mermaid and a unicorn tattooed on my arm. So I've always loved, like fantasy stories, fantasy creatures. So when I found out that Sylvia Browne actually said that they're real and they're just on another level of creation, I was freaking thrilled. What she points out in her book, Secrets and Mysteries of the World, is, it's kind of like Jesus said, blessed are those who have believed and not seen, or who have not seen yet believed. So basically, in this video, I won't go into detail about like the levels of creations, but essentially in a nutshell, the levels of creations can kind of like bleed through into different planes of existence. So what Sylvia Browne says is that, she's a psychic, so she's already sensitive to energy and things like that. So it was like 1977 and she was visiting Ireland. She says that she actually saw a fairy on an oleander bush. She had on like a blue gossamer dress, which this is actually the second story that I've heard of a fairy wearing like blue garments. But this fairy had on like a blue gossamer dress and she was flitting about by an oleander bush. She said she was beautifully formed. She had long, like golden hair, and she even blinked her eyes a little and like rubbed them. And when she opened them back up, she was still there. She said she screamed at the driver, and remember, she's in Ireland. She was like, "Oh my God, I just saw a fairy." And the driver was like, "Yeah, they're everywhere." So she might have been lucky because she's a psychic and she's like sensitive to stuff like that. But I want to see a freaking fairy. So there were like these fairy circles over an island on the Shannon Island. And they were building an airport there. And this was years and years and years ago. And when they were building the airport there, like all of these things started happening that were awful. People were getting sick. Machinery was breaking down. It was really bad for them. So they basically abandoned the project there, the Shannon Airport project, and they started building it somewhere else. And that was fine. That project went smoothly. Go figure. And if you supposedly talk about this with the locals that live there, Sylvia Browne says that they'll be like, yeah, duh. Like, you don't mess with fairy circles. You just don't. So like in super ancient times, like fairies were seen as like evil little beings, but they kind of morphed into, like Walt Disney, Tinkerbell. I mean, Tinkerbell was kind of a brat, but like, the whole fairies that are like cutesy and like do-gooders. And I think personally there's something in between. She does say that there seemed nothing evil about this one that she saw, where unlike in my other story, she had like crazy eyeballs that freaked the storyteller out. But Sylvia Browne says that there was nothing crazy about this fairy. And she said that her spirit guide actually said that she saw Lilith herself, which is basically like the queen of the fairies in the fairy realm. Of course, whether or not any of this is true, I don't know, but she swears that this is what happened. I believe in fairies. I believe in gnomes. I believe in unicorns. I believe in like all of those creatures, but I just think that they exist on a different level of creation. And sometimes if you're sensitive to energy, or if you truly believe that those levels of creation can like bleed through, like I was saying in the beginning, I think this is where people see like Sasquatch and things like that. I really think that's a thing. Do you guys believe in that? And again, if you have any fairy stories or any stories where you've seen like little gnomes or, Bigfoot or anything that could come from a different level of creation, please send me your stories so that I can tell them.